So today I'm going to focus on the current management and guidelines of COVID-19. These guidelines are based on the guidelines given by the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, AIIMS, New Delhi, and they are as latest as 3rd May. So various guidelines have been given on the management of COVID-19. All of them differ in some basic points, in some minor points, but most of them are the same. So I am sticking to the latest guideline issued by AIIMS. My presentation is going to basically focus on the COVID-19 severity classification. Classification is important because treatment protocol is based on the severity of classification, workup and initial management strategy, pharmacotherapy with prevention of complications. Classify a patient of COVID-19. So depending upon the classification is clinical, depending upon the respiratory rate and the saturation of the patient. So we have a mild patient. So how do we classify a patient of COVID-19? So depending upon the classification is clinical, depending upon the respiratory rate and the saturation of the patient. So we have a mild patient. So we have mild cases in which the saturation, the SpO2 that we measure most commonly when the patient comes to us is more than 94% and the respiratory rate is less than 24 per minute. The next is that the moderate cases that we have in which there is pneumonia with no signs of severe disease, the respiratory rate is more than 24 per minute or the SpO2 is less than 94 on room air, between 90 to 94. And we have the severe classification in which the respiratory rate is more than 30 per minute and the saturation is less than 90 on room air. So these are the three basic classifications in which we classify the patient whenever the patient of COVID-19 comes to us. So suppose we have a patient who is a COVID-19 suspect. The patient is presenting to us with fever, cough and breathlessness. We test the patient is positive. So now we have two broad categories. Either the patient is asymptomatic or the patient is symptomatic. If the patient is asymptomatic and he has no comorbid conditions, then we can consider the patient for home isolation. However, if the patient is symptomatic, then we again divide the patient into mild, moderate and severe categories. As I said earlier, mild when the respiratory rate is less than 24 and the saturation is more than 94 on room air. So we classify the patient as mild disease, and if comorbidities are present, then the patient needs to get admitted. Now, if the respiratory rate is more than 24 per minute or the saturation is less than 94 on room air, then we classify the patient as moderate disease and admit the patient in ward. If the patient is presenting to us in severe disease with a respiratory rate of more than 30 per minute or a saturation of less than 90 per minute, we classify the patient as having severe disease and the patient needs to be admitted in ICU. So this is a bird's eye view of the management protocol that we follow in the treatment of COVID-19. Mild disease, home care, no investigations required, and symptomatic treatment along with monitoring with a role of inhaled budesonide. Moderate to severe disease. Now we have a mnemonic that is ROAD or TOAD. ROAD is remdesivir, oxygen, anticoagulation, and dexamethasone. And TOAD is tocilizumab, oxygen, anticoagulation, and dexamethasone. So remember, the backbone of the therapy is oxygen, anticoagulation, and dexamethasone. So we have another patient who is coming to us with a history of hypertension, diabetes, and end-stage renal disease, and his saturation at presentation is 92%. So we classify this patient as having moderate disease. So what should be the immediate line of management in this patient? Should we give the patient remdesivir? Should we give the patient tocilizumab, or should we start the patient on dexamethasone? So coming to the available pharmacological options available, which are easily available to us, these are antivirals, anti-inflammatory, anticoagulation, and supplements. So the first drug that whenever we say antiviral that comes to our mind is remdesivir. So what are the clinical conditions in which remdesivir should be used? Now, effects are best seen in patients who present within 10 days of disease onset and those who require only low flow oxygen. And it is essential that all patients must have an eGFR determined and laboratory tests done before initiation of therapy. So remdesivir is only effective when it is given when the disease onset is less than 10 days and the patient is not having renal failure, or when the AST and ALT is less than 5 times of upper limit of normal. Guidelines have been given by the government on the use of remdesivir. So it is to be started only in a patient who has tested COVID positive in a lab test within 10 days of symptom onset, which is a mandatory criteria if they fit in any of the following 2 criteria. First, that is the oxygen saturation below 90%. And second, if the oxygen saturation is between 90 to 94% on room air for some time, then the patient should also have additional criteria such as tachypnea, tachycardia, or a CT score more than 13/25. Otherwise, inflammatory markers such as CRP, ferritin, IL-6 should also be raised. So only if the patient falls in any of these criteria, then only remdesivir should be started. There is no use of starting remdesivir if the disease progression has already taken place for more than 10 days. And the patient is just presenting to us, we have a lot of patients who come to us when the patient's initial saturation is 70%, and we have to immediately take the patient on NIV. And on taking the history of the patient tells us that fever occurred around 10 to 12 days back. So, and the antigen test or the RT-PCR test comes out to be negative. So in these criteria, in these category of patients, remdesivir will not benefit. Other important thing to remember is it has to be given in patients only with no hepatic or renal dysfunction. It is not recommended in pregnant ladies, lactating mothers, and children. And the recommended adult dose is 200 milligram IV on day 1, followed by 100 milligram IV daily for the next 4 days. Coming to another therapy that is being used quite frequently in COVID patients, that is convalescent plasma. So who are the ideal candidates who should receive convalescent plasma? Convalescent plasma has only been approved in patients of early moderate COVID-19 disease. So it is not indicated if the patient is having severe disease, the patient is already on ventilator, and already 10 days have passed from the starting of disease. So early moderate disease is that the patient is on oxygen, low flow oxygen therapy, and the duration of symptoms is only from till up to 7 days. So convalescent plasma should be given only in these patients. Considerations for convalescent plasma include an ABO compatibility and cross-matching, a high titer of IgG antibodies. Monitorings are required for reactions, and it should be avoided in patients with IgA deficiency or immunoglobulin allergy. The dose is variable. Usually a single dose of 200 ml should be given at least over 2 hours. Coming to the most important therapy that we should give all moderate to severe patients of COVID-19, that is corticosteroids. So dexamethasone is usually given in the dose of 6 milligram per day oral or IV for 10 days or till discharge, whichever is earlier. We can also give an equivalent dose of methylprednisolone or prednisolone, which can be used. Now, there is no proven role of increasing the dose of steroids. A lot of cases have been seen where the patients are have been given an increasing dose of steroid. Suppose the patient comes to us on day 7 or 8, and we start him on steroids of methylprednisolone 125 milligram OD. and the patient is not improving. So the next day, we start the patient on pulse therapy of 500 milligram or 1 gram of methylprednisolone. Now, no study has proven that a higher dose of steroids are beneficial to the patient. Rather, it leads to a lot of side effects such as hyperglycemia, hypernatremia, and the incidence of mucormycosis has also increased. So there should be a judicious role of steroids, and steroids should be given only in the recommended doses, and doses should not be escalated even if the patient is not improving. Along with this, we have anticoagulation in a conventional dose, prophylactic unfractionated heparin or LMWH, and it should be given weight-based, that is enoxaparin 0.5 milligram per kg per day, subcutaneous OD. Remember, I'm talking about moderate disease. Monitoring include the work of breathing, and anticoagulation has role in all patients, especially in moderate and severe disease. Tocilizumab has again a very selected role in moderate and severe disease. There is no definitive role of adding supplements. Oxygen and other supportive therapy are of paramount importance. So as I was discussing about the case 2, we had a 65-year-old male who presented to us with hypertension, diabetes, and end-stage renal disease in moderate COVID with an SpO2 of 92%. So what should be the starting therapy in this patient? Remdesivir, obviously it cannot be given as the patient is a case of end-stage renal disease. Tocilizumab cannot be given because the patient is not clinically deteriorating. However, the treatment of choice is dexamethasone. So what should be the consideration for step-up cases? We have to monitor all moderate patients for progressive worsening of PF ratio. Then hypertension might require with multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. And we should consider shifting the patient to ICU or HDU if any of the following conditions, if these conditions are present. So coming to our third case, we have a Mrs. Z, a 40-year-old female patient who is hypertensive, diabetic, who is admitted to the hospital with a diagnosis of severe COVID-19. She maintains a saturation of more than 92 on 4 liters of oxygen. On day 2, she is noticed to have increased shortness of breath with requirement of HFNC, which moves over to NIV. So now what should be the line of management in these patients? Should we start tocilizumab in this patient? Should we increase the dose of steroids in this patient? Or should we get a repeat investigations of an X-ray or a CT scan done? So in this patient, what the treating physician decided was that he repeated the X-ray of the patient, and the X-ray showed a pneumothorax. So the pneumothorax was drained, and the patient again maintained a saturation of SpO2, saturation of more than 94% with 4 liters per minute of oxygen. So the thing to remember over here is that when we are concentrating on the COVID-19 therapy, we should not forget our basic tenets of medicine, that whenever a patient is worsening, we should also think of other conditions that could happen to the patient, as in this case, the pneumothorax happened. So if we had not done an X-ray of the patient and just started the patient with tocilizumab, thinking that the patient is worsening because of COVID-19, that would have been disastrous for the patient. So the take-home message from this case is that we should also think clinically and think of other diseases along with COVID-19 that could affect the patient concomitantly. The increased dose of steroids, as I said earlier, no studies have said that increasing the dose of steroids in moderate to severe patients of COVID-19 will be of any real benefit. So this is where the role of X-ray, repeated X-ray or CT scan comes up. If the patient is clinically deteriorating and if we are suspecting some other disease, then definitely there is an indication of repeat CT or a repeat chest X-ray. So another thing that I would like to mention here is the importance of proning. Proning is come up in a very big way for the management of moderate to severe COVID-19 patients. Proning is the process of turning a patient with precise, safe motions from their back onto their abdomen, stomach, so that the individual is lying face down. Proning is a medically accepted position to improve breathing comfort and oxygenation. It is extremely beneficial in COVID-19 patients with compromised breathing comfort, especially during home isolation. The proning is required only when the patient feels difficulty in breathing and the saturation decreases below 94. And regular monitoring of SpO2 along with other signs such as temperature, blood pressure, and blood sugar is important. So, what is the duration of proning? Avoid proning for an hour after meals. One may prone for up to 16 hours a day in multiple cycles as felt comfortable. So proning has been recommended for up to 16 hours a day, and it definitely improves the saturation of the patient. We have to avoid proning in conditions such as pregnancy, DVT, major cardiac conditions, and unstable spine, femur, or pelvic fractures. The take-home message from my presentation is the classification of COVID-19 into mild, moderate, and severe is essential, and it is mostly dependent on clinical features. So there is no use of running after a CT scan, especially in patients of mild COVID-19. Lab parameters and imaging play ancillary role. There is no use of getting the routine. There is no use of getting inflammatory markers in patients of mild COVID-19. Remdesivir has role in selected patients of moderate and severe disease only when the symptom duration is less than 10 days and the